What's going on, everybody? Happy Victory Saturday, I guess. Welcome into this post-game edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Packers beat down on the Ravens, just like last week's didn't mean a ton when the Broncos beat down the Packers because not a lot of players played. Same thing can sort of be said at this one, basically, about the score and about, the ultimate result here. That doesn't matter. But just like last week where you were sort of disappointed in some of the fringe guys that maybe did or did not play well in that game, it's sort of the same, but opposite this time where you're feeling pretty good about some of the players that were right on that roster bubble that played well in this one. So I think there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. The two number 17s, I'm sure, are going to be brought up, and we'll talk about those two players today. Backup quarterback and kicker seem to be the two big concerns, and understandably so. We'll definitely touch base on that. But per usual, super chats will go to the top. We'll get to member chats after that. We'll try to get to as many chats overall as we possibly can, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I possibly can. Probably about 45 minutes here, and then I'm going to start prepping for the actual post-game reports that will go live later today for members and early tomorrow morning for everyone else. So make sure to check out those Pack-A-Day memberships, by the way. All right, young Feezy Baby coming in with the super chat right away. Thank you so much for that. Has Ryan issued a public apology to the Packers beat after the game turned out just like the joint practice? Was that the guy that was in the Ravens fan that was in everyone's mentions? No, I don't think he has, probably. If that is who you're talking about, I'm assuming it is, or at least one of the Ravens fans who were upset about it. It was very funny because, and we don't need to spend too much time on this, obviously, but like I tried explaining very simply, like, hey, I couldn't watch the Ravens offensive practice because I was watching the Packers offensive practice. So that's why I didn't tweet about the Ravens offensive stuff, because I literally didn't see it. And even then I was retweeting some of the touchdowns, like the one to Malik Cunningham, but it was a very hard concept apparently to sort of grasp. So no, I did not see any public apologies from any Ravens fans today. But yeah, I think it was, like I said, very similar to what Denver kind of did to Green Bay last week, where Denver took care of business in the joint practice and then followed it up with a really dominant preseason game. Green Bay basically did the opposite to the Ravens today in a very impressive performance in the joint practice, and then a even better preseason performance against the Ravens. So like I said, we're not all of a sudden now stacking these teams like Denver, Green Bay, Baltimore, right? Like Baltimore, Green Bay going to be really good teams. Denver, probably not. These are just practices. It's not a zero-sum game. They're not trying to ultimately win the Super Bowl in these given practices, and everyone's working on their craft. But overall, really good week of work for Green Bay. Yillerson, I guess. Teach Keyshawn Nixon to kick and free up a roster spot. Get a bit more value out of his contract. If kicks are going to be horribly inconsistent, might as well make them funny rather than depressing. So yeah, I think this was one of the things that was sort of trending in Anders Carlson's direction, right? Like if he makes that 32-yarder at the end, it's probably just Anders. And maybe it is still just Anders, but the final kick at the end, the 32-yarder that he missed, is just the ultimate Anders Carlson experience. And it just goes to show you he is a wild card. You never know what you're going to get. And quite frankly, it's not probably to be trusted. He could hit a 54-yarder on one play and miss a 32-yarder on the next. And one of the worst things that you can have for a coach at any position is inconsistency. If you know what you're going to get, like, hey, Anders is really good from 45 and in, but we know he's not going to make 50 plus or whatever, 46 plus. All right, at least you know that. But with Anders, it is a complete crapshoot at all times. He might go, 10 of 10 from 40 and under, and then, over 5 from 45 plus, and then it might swap, and you just don't know what's going to happen at any given moment. I think that 32-yarder was potentially a season-altering miss, one way or the other. I think you have to at that point. Like just when you're thinking maybe, there's been a little bit of momentum, it's just such a stark reminder of 32-yarder, about as easy of a field goal that you can get in the NFL. Good snap, no conditions, friendly confines of Lambeau Field, no wind, no nothing, and just completely misses it. That's not what you can have at that position. Now, the hard part, of course, and sorry, Yilich, for going on, obviously, and something I know you were joking about, and I appreciate, again, the super chat, by the way. That's just not a position where you can go and have no idea. And like I said, the hard part is what else is going to be out there? I do believe at this point that this is not a decision of Alex Hale versus Anders Carlson versus Greg Joseph. I believe that this is a decision of Anders Carlson or somebody that's not on the roster. I believe that is ultimately what this will come down to. And I think they're going to have to go through each of these kickers and see if they feel comfortable with one of them being their kicker for this upcoming season. And they could work to trade, just like we saw Cade York traded for a conditional 7th round pick. You could see something like that in the next couple days. Or you could maybe just see them try to get somebody off of waivers. Whatever it is, I do believe that it's probably in their best interest to try something different at this point. And I understand that sometimes patience is a virtue with young kickers, just like it can be with young quarterbacks. I get it. I just haven't seen anything, since Anders has got here, or really going back to college with Anders, of any sort of legitimate consistency or any sort of legitimate growth from him as a kicker. And there's nothing there that is like, even the 50-yarder he made, it was like just barely, and it didn't give you, it didn't feel like it was kicked with like a ton of confidence. Like, we're not talking about somebody that at least the 82% of the time that he is making kicks, that it's like drilled right in the middle. It's all over the place, and you never know what you're going to get. And I think that's why everyone is obviously really concerned. Obviously, Greg Joseph, who's been a journeyman and has not been a consistent kicker. I don't think that is the answer either. And he's at 78% for camp. And then obviously it's not going to be Alex Hale either. So it's just, can you find a kicker on another roster somewhere? And that's going to be the big question moving forward. And I think they will. That's my guess right now, is I think they're going to try to find a kicker from another roster. Preston, without question, Carlson and Joseph would cost Green Bay games if they're remaining on the roster. I don't know what's available, but we can't have them out there. And I think, again, there within lies the question, Preston, is there a kicker that you trust anymore? And I don't know that there's going to be. I know that the Titans kicker today is going to have a big game probably ahead of him. I think he kicks later today, if I remember correctly. I think it's Narvison, if I remember correctly. Let's see. When do the Titans play? Oh, no, they play, 1 p.m. tomorrow is when the Titans play. Actually, both those teams, Titans and Saints, play tomorrow at 1. Both of them have double kickers on their roster, although Charlie Smith for the Saints is extremely inexperienced. Matthew Wright, I know, kicked for the Steelers today. Austin Seibert will be kicking for the Jets at 6:30 p.m. today on NFL Network. So if you want to do some kicker scouting, there are some dual kickers that are out there that you may want to keep an eye on. What did Matthew Wright do today? Matthew Wright for the Steelers was 1 for 1, and that was it. 1 for 1 with a 26-yarder. Yeah, so you don't learn anything from that whatsoever, except I guess that he didn't biff a 26-yarder, which is, I guess, good, but again, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to find, I think, a kicker that you're going to have a ton of confidence going into week 1 with. But hopefully Goody can work his magic. It's the one position where I think right now, from like a starting standpoint, if we're going to count kicker as a starter, that you really have some legitimate concerns over. I think everything else you feel pretty good about going into week 1 against the Eagles. She said, Joey, thank you so much for being a member for 3 months. Appreciate that a ton. Release Carlson and get him back onto the practice squad. I don't think that's completely unheard of. I don't know that they're going to keep 2 kickers on the practice squad, meaning Alex Hale is the International Pathway Program and a kicker on the practice squad is one of the 16 and a kicker on the 53. But I do see a world in which, maybe they do release him and try to get him back. I certainly don't think he gets claimed. I don't know of any team that's going to be like, yep, that's our answer. And if so, do you want to trade us, your kicker? Because we would like to have that conversation in all likelihood. So yeah, I don't think that he is going to get claimed in any real way. So is it a possibility that he could be back on the practice squad? Yes. But first of all, Green Bay is going to have to make the decision on whether or not they want to go with another kicker. And I think that's going to be the other interesting thing here is, does Goody want to, let's say Goody does come to the conclusion that Anders is not going to be the kicker and that Greg Joseph is not going to be the kicker. How does he go about that? And the 2 options would be the Cade York option, what Washington just did, right? Making sure that of anyone else that could get cut, that they get the guy that they want, and trading away a conditional 7th or maybe a roster guy that they were going to release anyway with some team. Could they work out a swap with that? Maybe, right? So do they go that route? And do they pinpoint whatever kicker is on some team's 53 and work out a trade and make sure that they get their guy and that he doesn't get claimed somewhere else? Because it's not like Green Bay's super low on the waiver wire order, right? So then the other thing would be, do they just release Joseph and Carlson and Hale, who will get back on the International Pathway Program on the practice squad afterward? Do they release all 3 of those guys go with a different 53. And then when they claim somebody, then release somebody off the 53 at that point and maybe play a little bit more of a gamble with who actually gets released from a roster. So there's a variety of ways that Goody could go about doing this. I'm very intrigued. Or, of course, they could just keep Anders Carlson too. And not leaning in that direction at the moment based on what we saw again today. Just too much inconsistency. But this is obviously going to be a very big, 48 to 72 hours for the kicker position with what Green Bay ultimately does with it. The McPain train. Thank you for the super chat. Did the safeties watch some Ed Reed before the game? Who do you think they drop? Shout out to King for redeeming his name today with the forced fumble. Yeah, so I think, first of all, you could tell that Matt had a message to his team that he really wanted them to play their brand of football and play an intimidating physical game. And I thought overall special teams, offense, defense, especially from a run blocking standpoint and some of those big hits that we saw on defense, I thought they played as physical of a preseason game that I can ever remember the Packers playing, quite frankly. So I thought they really, and even the running backs, the way that they were lowering their pads and getting yards after contact, like the guys stepped up in this one and they played a different brand of football than they did against Denver. And there were a lot of fringe, roster guys that really put their best foot forward and made a name for themselves, or at least like showed what they're capable of and helped their resume. Right. So I thought that was encouraging, but yeah, Anthony Johnson Jr. with the big hit. And then, I thought, King, there was the play obviously where, I asked Matt about it after the game. Two guys, jumped the early route and then left the other route wide open, which resulted in a touchdown. So they're going to have to get that cleaned up a little bit. But outside of that, Kalen King, big forced fumble. I thought he was good the remainder of the day. But I just thought overall some really impressive performances. And I think they're going to make it really difficult on Goody and Matt in trying to make some of these roster decisions. Cause I was going through it today in the press box and just like trying again to manipulate my 53 prediction and where I wanted to go. I will say, I thought going into the middle of the third quarter with the way that, Pratt and Carlson were playing up until that point, right before Pratt's interception and Carlson's missed field goal, I felt a little bit more confident. Now I'm a little bit more back to the drawing board, but certainly a lot of impressive players that put their best foot forward today. And I love the physicality. F it, trade for Justin Tucker. I kid. I'm sure a lot of teams, it's always like an interesting question, right? Of like, what if the Ravens were to put Justin Tucker on the block, what would be the highest bid for somebody like that? It's always a unique question to me. Now he's a little bit older at this point, but still he's the best kicker in the league and there's a lot of value. Now, if Baltimore had, lost Lamar Jackson for the season, or if they were a complete rebuilding team, maybe that's something that you could look at. But obviously, and I know you're joking, but the Ravens have Super Bowl aspirations of their own. So a lot of the teams with really good kickers do. Harrison Butker's another one. Like those are they're tough to come by, right? Green Bay had a pretty darn good stretch, and I know there was a couple hiccups in the middle, but Chris Jackie, Ryan Longwell, Mason Crosby, that's a pretty darn good few decades of kickers in Green Bay. Like I said, not always perfect. And you had the Brett Conway experiment. I remember some Dave Rayner somewhere in there. It wasn't always perfect, but we've been pretty lucky as fans to watch some pretty darn good kicking over the years in Green Bay. And you don't necessarily recognize that it's a problem until it's a problem. And right now it is a definite problem on this team. All right. So what else we got? I'm going to try to get to some of the member chats here. Let's see. Matthew, backup quarterback is also a bleep show. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think Pratt still did some really good things in this game. And the interception, the one thing I will say about that, yes, that was a bad pick. And then he, doubled down on it by trying to make a crazy tackle on the play, which did not result in a positive outcome for him. What I will say is that was one of his first turnovers of, training camp. Like he has taken very good care of the football in training camp from an interception standpoint. I think he may have had a fumble in one of the preseason games, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe I'm misremembering, but either way, I do think he's taking great care of the football. So this was a little bit of a one-off from an interception standpoint. He hasn't done that at all really in camp. So I'm willing to give, rookie quarterback trying to make a play, got a little bit, flustered in the pocket, didn't see the guy, threw it right to him. It's one of those things you live and learn on. And with a rookie quarterback, you're going to have those mistakes. It's not going to be perfect, but the throw he had to Bo Melton and just the arm talent that he has, his mobility, there are things that you can do that if, like, let's say you were scheming up a game, right? If you had to go into two games without without Jordan Love, I think there's more that you can do with Michael Pratt to get him some throws that would be beneficial, to get him going down the field. He's got the mobility again. I just think there's more that you can do with Sean Clifford. I think it becomes a lot tougher. Now Clifford maybe could be a little bit more of a point guard, but we've also seen a lot of mistakes from Sean Clifford and a lot of interceptable passes all throughout camp, mini camp, OTAs, etc. So to me, there's higher reward with Michael Pratt. There's lower risk with Michael Pratt. There's higher upside with Michael Pratt. And to me, that's kind of what the decision comes down to. And even in a game where, again, it's not like Pratt was, incredible, but it's mostly due to that interception. Sean Clifford, 3.8 yards per attempt, or 30 yards per completion, I should say, or no, the yards per attempt, I think it was. Either way. Yeah, yards per attempt. 6 of 14 completed passes, under 50%. Did have the one touchdown, but to me, that one touchdown throw to Malik Heath did not make up for the rest of his day. I thought the rest of his day was pretty brutal outside of that one touchdown throw, which he really needed at that point in time, because it had just all the momentum was in Pratt's favor. And then, of course, Pratt comes back and throws the pick after that. But to me, you can live with Pratt. I'm not sure that you can move forward with Clifford as your backup, just because I don't know what the reward is there. And if it's a long-term injury for Love, you're probably screwed anyway. So go with the 7th round pick who has some upside, see if you can develop him and see if you can, come into anything as a QB in this league. But it's not ideal. I don't think it's completely out of the question that they could go backup QB shopping. I think a Taylor Heineke would make a ton of sense. I think if you went into the season with a Jordan Love, Taylor Heineke, Michael Pratt quarterback trio, I think you feel pretty darn good about that. But, maybe the Falcons don't want to give up Heineke. Maybe Green Bay has other interest. Who knows? But I do see a world in which they could potentially look at a QB. And Matt LaFleur basically said, so he answered the question about the kicker, saying, basically saying, we'll see what's out there. And then answered the quarterback question by saying it's basically the same as the kicker position. So if you told me right now that the number 2 QB and the number 1 kicker are not currently on the 91-man roster, that would not stun me at all. It just depends on what Goody can kind of pull off and how he can kind of build this roster. And remember too, it doesn't necessarily have to be this week. There is a lot of season. You can make transactions throughout the course of the year. And I guarantee Green Bay will be aggressive trying to find a kicker until they get one in that they feel comfortable with. So that's going to be, again, I know the big 2 questions though, as we sort of, kind of get to cut down to the remainder of this week. If I had to bet who kicks week 1, I guess if I'm betting, right, if I'm making an educated bet, I would go Anders, right? Because if you're going, it's not going to be Joseph or Hale. So like those 2 to me are out of the question. And then it becomes Anders or every other kicker that might become available. So like I could say Narvison for the Titans. I could say Austin Seibert for the Jets. I could say Matthew Wright for the Steelers. Charlie Smith for the Saints, Joey Sly for the Patriots. I could say one of those names, but the odds that I hit the exact one would probably be pretty slim, right? So if you had me pick a name, I think your best odds are with Anders. If I'm betting, if I'm going Anders or the field, meaning like somebody that's not on the team, I honestly think it's a coin flip, but I will slightly say I think it's maybe somebody that's not on the team right now. And then who that is, good luck. I don't know. I mean, it's probably one of the guys that are on a 53 right now, and there's only so many of those. Let me see if I can find the names that I looked up the other day. All right, so it was Joey Sly and Chad Ryland in New England, Austin Seibert for the Jets, Matthew Wright for the Steelers, Spencer Schrader for the Colts, Braden Narvison for the Titans, Jude McAtmany for the Giants, and Charlie Smith for the Saints. Those are probably the ones. Randy Bullock, career 83.4% field goal kicker, is also a free agent. The thicker kicker is still out there as well, but if they hadn't picked him up by now, I don't necessarily see that happening. So those are probably the names that you're looking at. If New England decides to keep Chad Ryland, Joey Sly might be the name that at least has the most experience there. But again, Sly is at one point in camp was 28 of 34, I know, which is 82.35%. He's a career 82.3% kicker. You basically know what you're getting there, right? He was at 83.3% in 2022. He was 79.2% last year in 2023. You kind of know what you're getting. Like I'm more apt to take, a flyer on maybe one of these younger guys and see if they can just develop into something. I really thought Cade York was a potential name to watch, but maybe Washington beat Green Bay to it. I don't know, but that would have been a name that I think would have made some sense for Green Bay. Brian, appreciate that a ton. She said, Joe, I thought Jacob Monk had a damn good day. Offensive line is one of those ones where I always for everyone would like to hold until the all 22 as much as possible, but offensive line and defensive line especially are ones that I want to wait until I have the all 22 to make any jumping conclusions to. But I definitely, and especially from watching in the press box, like it's really difficult to see like exactly what's going on in the trenches. You guys probably had a better view at home than what we had, but overall, I thought from a run game standpoint, they were definitely moving some people. Looked like the left side, quite frankly, Telfort, Lacita Smith, and Jacob Monk were doing some serious work on that left side. So excited to go back. I should get all 22 later today. Going to do my best to, put get as many grades done tonight as I can, and hopefully have those up for tomorrow. But yeah, excited to watch the all 22 and really like what I've been seeing from Jacob Monk overall so far. All right, what else do we want to answer here? Holmes made one. Carlson's field goal percentage this camp is 20% higher than in last year's camp. Give the guy a chance. It's his second year. Yeah. And then he misses a 32-yarder in a game at Lambeau with no, win, no nothing. It's just too chaotic for me. Listen, if that's your cup of tea, if you want chaos at kicker, be my guest. Just because I think one thing doesn't mean that that's the perfect overall solution. And there might not be a better option out there. They might determine that going a little bit longer with Anders to see if he can get it figured out is worthwhile. I just think at this point, he's kind of shown what he is, because his only consistency has been inconsistency. It's been consistently like 81%, and just not really showing any growth. And I know you're saying it's 20%. That doesn't make me feel any better that he kicked even worse last year. Like, I know there's some improvement, but to me, it hasn't been enough. I don't see him. I thought early in camp, he was striking the ball with some level of consistency, meaning like I like the way it was coming off of his foot. I haven't seen the same as of late. And it just feels like there's too many peaks and valleys here. And if it's me, I'm probably going in a different direction. All right. She said, weekly, can you talk about the offensive line and running back battles? So let's start with running back. I'll talk about both of them, but let's talk about running back first. There might not be a battle here. And the question mark, I think, is the health for Marshawn Lloyd and, of course, for A.J. Dillon as well. If neither of them are available week one, Green Bay has a very interesting decision of how they want to play this. And both of them or neither of them could end up on IR to start the year. It just depends on when the timeline is that they think these guys are going to be back. I think there's a better chance Lloyd is back sooner than Dillon. It sounds like they're being extremely cautious with Dillon, knowing that this is his second stinger injury. I think there's a better chance that Dillon starts the year on IR. But to me, I don't think there's any chance Emmanuel Wilson probably does. I shouldn't say any chance, but I think Emmanuel Wilson has a really great chance to make it just based on the fact that, Josh Jacobs is going to be, good to go week one, but you don't know about Lloyd, and you certainly don't know about A.J. Dillon at this point of if they're going to be healthy or not. And even if Lloyd is healthy, I don't know that he's shown enough where you're just like, yep, he's going to be running back 2 on day 1. So I think Emmanuel Wilson's going to be there. And then the question remains, if Lloyd and Dillon aren't healthy week 1, is it Jacobs, Wilson, and somebody else? Is it Merriweather? I thought McCrary ran really well today. Is it somebody that's not on the roster right now, or did they just go with 2? I think they're going to have some really interesting decisions there on how they want to navigate that running back position, knowing that Dillon and Lloyd are both out, but neither of them are probably out for the year or anything like that. So it's going to be a very interesting question and dynamic of how they play that out. But I don't think it's necessarily a battle. I think there's a clear sort of pecking order where you have Jacobs, and then you have like Dillon and Lloyd, and then you probably have Wilson a little bit of a tier below that. And I do think both McCrary and Merriweather put in strong performances towards trying to make a practice squad, but I don't think they're really in the 53 discussion again, unless Lloyd and Dillon are both out for a long enough period of time where you need to add Wilson and another running back to back up Jacobs. So to me, this is a harder one to answer because I think you really have a lot of injury stuff to figure out that we just don't know or have the answers to right now. As far as offensive line goes, I think it's rather simple, at least for the most part, right? So Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, Sean Ryan, and Zach Tom, Jordan Morgan, Jacob Monk. And I really believe that Kadeem Telfort is going to be on this team as well. I think those are your 8. Then I think the question becomes, do you have 9 or 10? And I think the only 2 other names that are really in consideration at this point, just my guess, are Andre Dillard and Travis Glover. And I think Dillard probably has the nod here if you only go with 1. But I do think Travis Glover is somebody that they probably want to make this team draft pick. I do think there's some upside there. Big human, moves well, needs to work on his technique, but I think there is something there. So I think they keep 10 is where I think they go with this. And I think those are the obvious 10. I don't think that there's anyone else that's really in the conversation. To me, that's it. It's 9 or 10. And then is it Dillard or Glover that gets the last spot? And I lean towards both of them actually making it as the 9th and the 10th guy, but they could easily go with 9 because there's some really difficult roster decisions to be made elsewhere. And if they only go with 9, then I do think there's probably only one spot for either Dillard or Glover. And then it becomes a little bit more tricky. And I'm not sure which way they go. I would actually lean Glover, especially with Dillard being a little bit banged up. But that's an interesting one. But I think they go with 10. I think the 10 are obvious. If they go with 9, one of those 2 guys, and I would lean Glover right now. Jason, thank you for the super chat. I know this is off topic, but Evan Williams reminds me so much of Micah Hyde. Maybe it's the 33. I've seen a lot of this. I think there's certainly the ball skills, right, are very similar. I think Hyde was clearly a better true corner. Like Williams is a safety all day, every day, in my opinion. Like Hyde could actually play a legitimate nickel corner and was a good nickel corner, and he could play safety. Was a little bit undersized at a safety. Evan Williams is not. But I do think the instincts and the ball skills are very much, reminiscent. I actually said the other day, and again, I'm not saying he's going to get to this peak level or whatever, but I see a little Justin Simmons in Evan Williams, and what he can do on the back end and how he plays sort of center field, how he can come up and play in the box. That to me is a little bit more reminiscent, but I do understand the 33 and the ball skills. It does remind you from time to time of what Micah Hyde could do out there. I do not believe Clifford would start for the Vikings, angry casual fan. I do not believe that is true. Certainly not with, if McCarthy was healthy, but I do think Darnold would be a step up over Clifford, but maybe not a ton, hopefully not a ton, but I do think that Darnold is definitely better. Dillard has really been that bad in camp. So this is a good question. So Dillard's interesting. He started awful in camp, and I mean awful. It was really, really bad. He did settle down, but he settled down once he moved to left tackle. And then as soon as he kind of settled, and when I say settled down, it was like, it was fine. It wasn't good. It was fine. It was kind of Josh Nijman-esque. All right. It was fine. But it was only at left tackle. He sort of refuses to play guard and doesn't want to play guard, and quite frankly, isn't good at guard. And he really struggled at right tackle. Like I don't think he likes right tackle. He doesn't feel comfortable at right tackle, and it looked awful at right tackle. So if you keep him, you are on a left tackle only basically basis with Andre Dillard, in my opinion. I don't think he has the ability to actually be a swing tackle. So that's why, to me, I think, first of all, that Telfort is ahead, because I think Telfort can play left tackle, right tackle, and he also played guard in minicamp and OTAs. And I think he's just, quite frankly, been a little bit better than Dillard. So that to me is the reason why there. And then if Telfort is going to be your swing guy, do you want the Dillard, the 1-year veteran guy who is or do you want a developmental guy in Travis Glover? Now, I just think that offensive line is hard enough to find that I think you keep both of those guys. One is a vet, one is a developmental guy. Keeping 10 offensive linemen is not anything crazy. That happens all the time for a lot of teams. So it's not like we're keeping, 13 offensive linemen here, but that's the direction that I would go. But I could understand a world in which he's only a left tackle. He has still struggled. He started camp terrible and on a 1-year deal, and he's hurt, so I could just see enough where maybe they're just like, let's go in a different direction and let's stick with a younger guy who maybe has more long-term upside. Does Sean Clifford, he trade or drop? I think I'm understanding your question. Do you mean like, would Sean Clifford get traded or would he just get cut? I do not think that Sean Clifford would have trade value. I would love to be wrong. Like, that would be a fun one to be wrong on. I would love if some team called up and be like, we would love to give you draft picks for Sean Clifford. I just don't see it. I don't even think he gets claimed if Green Bay releases him. quite frankly. I think he makes it through waivers, and I think he's probably back on the practice squad. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. I don't think he has trade value. But if I'm misinterpreting your question, I will try to keep an eye out in chat to see if you ask something different or clarify it. But yeah, I definitely think that this is probably something where Sean Clifford does not have trade value. Just making sure I didn't miss any super chats here. All right. Omer, I want to see Bo Melton returning kicks. That man has got some nice wheels under him. I think we could at some point. I think we definitely could see Bo Melton maybe get that opportunity, but this is going to be Keyshawn's job, right? Keyshawn's going to be the kick returner. But if Keyshawn is out, or if he has, a day where he's going to be super busy on defense and they don't want to wear him out or whatever, could they do something like that? Yes. But, they haven't really put him back there. It's been Emmanuel Wilson primarily. So I think this is probably just Nixon, and then they'll figure out the rest later if something happens to Nixon. But I think he could be somebody that in the right situation could maybe be used in a kick returner role. 53 projection will likely be on Monday. So I will put it together tomorrow, and for members, it'll post tomorrow, but that'll go live on Monday for most people. Joey, did anyone earn a job today? I know a lot of people did their best to really try to make it difficult to cut them. I thought Malik Heath had a fantastic day. I thought he was really, really good. I think he's been really great for the last couple of weeks. I would be pretty close to locking in Malik Heath and that number 6 wide receiver spot, to be honest. I thought, I'm like I said, I'm looking forward to watching the offensive line, seeing if Telfort and some of those guys played as well as it kind of looked like at first glance. So we'll kind of see there. I thought Aaron Mosby certainly did everything that he could to get his name in the conversation. I'm not sure there's a spot for him, but I think he may have jumped Brenton Cox. I think there's a good chance they don't keep 5 defensive ends, but if they do, there's a real question now between Mosby and Brenton Cox. Christian Welch did everything that he could have done to try to make the team as a linebacker. So he had a good day. Kalen King, I know there was maybe the one play that he had some fault on the touchdown, but overall, I thought he made some impressive plays out there. Anthony Johnson Jr. with his big hits. I don't know that he was a fringe guy either way, but I thought he had a really great day. Up until the last kick, I thought Anders was trending in that direction, but clearly that was not the case. But I thought a lot of those guys that were right on the bubble really did a great job of playing well. Zane Anderson had a pass breakup and just making it really difficult for this coaching staff. So really, really interesting. All right. What else we got here? Joshua said, love Hopper as a draft pick, and I still love him. Huge upside. I've, ever since Hopper got to really rookie minicamp, he was somebody that kind of stood out. I still think like last week in his first game, there were some ups and downs. Coverage was a little bit tougher for him than it was in run defense, but I love the way that he plays the linebacker position. There's a lot of juice there. There's a lot of physicality and tenacity. And I'm excited to see what he can do. I'm interested to see if he can get in that base defense conversation, maybe take over for an Eric Wilson at some point. But I think long-term, I'm hopeful that maybe they've got a couple young, up and coming linebackers in Hopper and Cooper, but we just need to see those guys out there more and see what they're capable of. But early returns have shown certainly an upside, if nothing else, from Tyron Hopper. Matthew, on Hopper, these nicknames confuse me. Oh, Hopper these nicknames confuse me at times. I'm just going to post this because Chris Jackie was good. Chris Jackie was good. 53 prediction or a 55-man roster now? Yeah, I mean, if you're asking is it a 55-man roster because of the 2 IR guys, then yeah, I think it's going to be 55. I think Dylan and Tyler Davis start on IR would be my guess right now. If I were putting it together today, I think those 2 are the ones that start on IR. Let's talk Robert Rochelle for a second. That's an interesting situation so what happens here is if you have an injury, right, you have to be waived injured, in which case it is exceedingly unlikely that a player like that gets claimed. If he doesn't get claimed, he reverts to injured reserve. And then what you have to do is work out an injury settlement for how many weeks you think he would be out. So there's obviously a negotiation that sort of takes place of how long, let's say they thought Rochelle was going to be out 4 weeks. So they do a 4-week injury settlement where they pay him what he would have made on those 4 weeks of being on the roster. And then when he's released with that injury settlement, he cannot re-sign with Green Bay for those 4 weeks. And I think it's a 6-week period on top of that, if I remember correctly. I could have the number of weeks wrong, but it's 4 weeks plus an additional period of time. So as soon as he is healthy enough after that 4 weeks, he can go sign with another team, but he can't sign with Green Bay right away. So it makes it exceedingly difficult that you actually ever get that player back on your roster. And we saw that happen with Tyler Goodson. Actually, I think it was Tyler Goodson, but for sure it was like Lou Nichols last year, where Nichols gets released with an injury settlement. And then when he's healthy, like he goes to a practice squad for a different team because Green Bay can't sign him back yet. So like it just becomes a situation where if you want Rochelle on this team, like if he's going to be out 4 weeks or whatever it might be, 2 weeks, 1 week, like if you waive him injured, you're basically not getting him back. Like you would basically need to keep him on the 53. So I don't know how that changes things. And maybe he's just as a 1 week precaution and he's good to go and he'll be ready for week 1 and it's a non-issue. But like those become a little bit more of intriguing situations and scenarios when you get to some of those injury settlements. Angry Casual Fan, give me Merriweather, Joseph, and Heath on the 53. I will be willing to bet you that one of those will be on the 53. I think you know which one. What he said, hit that like button, E. Appreciate that. I don't know if somebody else put that out there, but thank you very much. Matthew, is there any scenario where Goody re-signs Mason Crosby and cuts Carlson or Obasasha? No, Mason's done. I think he's actually starting a different endeavor soon. I don't have 100% confirmation on that, but I think Mason is going to be doing something different in the near future. But Mason's done. That ship has sailed. Mason will not be back in Green Bay this year. Mosby have a chance at the 53. Love the way he has played in the preseason. I do. I think he has a chance. Now, whether or not he actually makes it is a different story altogether. But I do think he's very much in the conversation. He's a good special teams player, and he gives you some juice off the edge. I don't know that you need 5 defensive ends. And I think with a really tough, crowded roster, I'm not sure either of those guys separated themselves enough. But if one of them did, it might be Mosby. To me, I would probably go with Preston, Gary, and Enagbare and LVN. And then again, if I need a player in a game, I know that I can put Carl Brooks or Colby Wooden out there, and it's not a big issue. But as like your 4th guy, and then I think you can probably get Cox and Mosby back on the practice squad. But those are interesting decisions. I certainly think that it's he's within the realm of possibility to make the roster, and he's definitely helped himself with the performance he put out there against the Ravens. All right, we went over that. Jackie was a good kicker, but he's beyond wide right on X. Well, we don't need to talk about that. Sorry, I just saw a members chat. Do you think Oladapo goes to the practice squad? I do not. I think 5th round pick. Matt LaFleur had a pretty glowing review of him from his first game last week. I think he's probably more of a redshirt guy this year, unless he gets activated and plays some teams. I don't think you're going to see him at safety on the field a ton this upcoming year, barring a lot of injuries at safety. I think he's got at least 4 guys ahead of him. And even Zane Anderson played ahead of him at safety today. We'll see if Zane makes the roster or not, but I think he's a redshirt guy, but I think he makes the 53. I don't think they trust getting him back off of waivers. I like Hafley running simple defensive schemes and not showing his hand. We don't want any usable tape. I totally agree with that. Andy, what are the best reactions LaFleur has had to your questions? He seemed to like your idea on the 2 right guards. That was probably the best one I've got. That was a fun one today when I asked him if they could rotate right guards. He's done that a little bit to some of the beat guys recently, though, of like, hey, that's a good idea. Maybe we'll think of that. And, just being a little bit more, kind of, I don't want to say like joking around about it, but just being, kind of whatever you want to take that as. But yeah, he's been kind of fun with that stuff. I don't think I've had any other ones where it was like really like a crazy interaction, but yeah, that was a good response from him. I liked it. Any chance the Packers perhaps give Bakhtiari a call? No chance. No chance. Could it happen if Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom and, a couple other guys go down for the year? Yeah, maybe. I still think it's unlikely, but then it becomes a lot more possible. But Rasheed Walker's been great. He's been great in camp. I really liked what he did in preseason with the limited snaps that he got. He's your left tackle. Zach Tom's your right tackle. That's not changing anytime soon. And you're not signing Bach to be a swing tackle, nor is he coming back to be a swing tackle. So no, there's almost 0% chance. Better chance than Mason Crosby coming back, but don't expect Bakhtiari or Mason Crosby back on this team anytime soon. What else? Andy, if you're keeping the best 53, do we keep 7 receivers and go a man thin on the offensive line? I mean, so best 53 is a difficult conversation, right? And there's always competing interests here because like are Oladapo and Travis Glover right now part of the best 53? Probably not. Like they're probably not ready to come in and play a bunch of snaps right now. There's probably like I just use those as examples, but there's probably other ones too. But you can maybe make the argument for Michael Pratt too. But do I want to keep maybe the upside there of Oladapo and Michael Pratt and Travis Glover? Yeah, I do. So like is best 53 best for right now? Is it best for the future? Is it best for how do you want to define that, I guess? But I don't think they go with 7 wide receivers. I don't think Grant Dubose has done enough to unseat Malik Heath, and I expect it to be Malik Heath. But no, I don't think I would keep 7 wide receivers on this roster. And I think there's just a really great chance that they once again get Grant Dubose back on the practice squad. All right. Well, I'm just trying to get some other questions here. Kickers need more attempts to develop confidence. It's a unique position in pro ball. Maybe. Like, I just have a hard time believing that they're going to release Anders and like 3 years from now, he's one of the best kickers in the league. And it's a massive regret. I just think, I think he kind of is what he is at this point. All right. Does AJ Dillon get traded or dropped? I think he goes on IR to be honest. And I don't know enough about that to say that with any real level of confidence. We'll see if he's healthy enough, but if that's going to be something that's going to linger a little bit for the first, month of the season, my guess is he's one of the ones that get on IR. All right, what do we got here? Sorry. Technical difficulties. There we go. Landon. I think Heath locked up the wide receiver 6 spot this preseason. I think he gets better the more and more reps that he gets. I think so too. I really, really do. All right, a couple more questions here, guys. Then I am probably going to bounce and start getting tomorrow's post-game show all set and ready. Andy, any fantasy leagues this year? I'm in one fantasy league with some other Packers people around the Packers sphere. But yeah, nothing too crazy, nothing too high stakes. And then I will be doing for Pack-A-Day members the Pick'em League again this year with the opportunity to win Packers tickets next year. So I will be doing Pick'em again this upcoming season. Excuse me. So that'll be announced soon. Welch seems like a good practice squad lock, if not sneaking on the 53. I agree. I think they definitely want him back. I think they probably ideally just like him back on the practice squad. I don't think he gets claimed. So I think he probably ends up back on the practice squad. He's a really tough player to figure out a way to get onto the 53. And I don't think he makes it, but I do think he gets back on the practice squad. Yeah. And we just talked about it. Same thing, Droid 6689. I think he ends up on the practice squad getting called up for games here and there as a special teamer more than anything else. Whiskey, I can believe he missed a 32-yarder, unfortunately. We need a strong receiver like Heath. Dubose should be on the practice squad. Dubose is pretty strong too. And actually the one reason why I do kind of like the potential for Dubose there is because I do think he's actually shown up well as a blocker and on special teams. So I think there's a chance for Dubose. I just think Malik Heath's been a little bit better. Joel Wilson needs to work on his hands, but he was blocking nicely. That's been the thing for him all camp. His hands have been suspect. His route running, okay, but his run after the catch has been good, and his blocking's been pretty solid. I think there's something there. I think he's probably one of the best bets to make it back to the practice squad. Mosby, same thing. I think, would you, here's the thing, right? They'd probably love 60 roster spots, right? To get a lot of these guys back. They just don't have it. I think Mosby did everything he can to make the case for himself. I think he's probably a guy that they get back on the practice squad as well. But here's the big thing I will say, and maybe this is a great way to wrap it up is, I know Tuesday is cut down day, and that's going to be a huge day. Wednesday is waiver claim day. And what you really want to just hope is that Green Bay can get as many of these guys back as possible. Because I do think they have a lot of 53-man caliber players on this team, whether it's a Zane Anderson, even a Benny Sapp. I think, Christian Welch, who could get released, either a Grant Dubose or Malik Heath, whoever gets cut there. I think there will be offensive linemen. I think there will be Aaron Mosby, Brenton Cox, whoever ends up not making it. I think there's a lot of these guys that could make 53s for a lot of teams. Now, not a lot of guys get claimed. Maybe, the Packers get 1 or 2 guys claimed, but I think overall It's been a really good showing of some of the depth that they have at some of these positions, and hopefully they can get the vast majority of the guys that they release back on the practice squad. All right, Frank, would you say it's a safe bet that whomever the third quarterback is on the roster can safely go through waivers and end up back in the practice squad? No. I think somebody would claim Michael Pratt. I really do. I'd be surprised if he made it through waivers. I could be wrong, but I think he's shown enough upside. I think there's something there, and I would not put him on waivers. I think Michael Pratt makes the roster. Oladapo could play big nickel. I actually disagree. I think Oladapo is more likely to be a nickel linebacker than he is a slot nickel guy. I don't see Oladapo as a slot nickel guy at all. I do think he could play some nickel linebacker. That I could see, but I don't think you want to line him up too much in the slot. Clifford could go to the practice squad tomorrow and no one would notice. No team is grabbing him. One of the things I recognize, I was talking to Jacob Westendorf in the press box about this. This reminds me a little bit of, honestly, the Brian Brom and Matt Flynn situation. Now, they were both in the same draft class, right? Brom and Flynn, whereas Pratt and Clifford are in different classes. But remember, Brom was a second round pick and Flynn was the 7th rounder. In this case, Clifford was a 5th and Pratt was a 7th rounder. Again, slightly different because it's different draft classes, but in their rookie year, Matt Flynn just beat out Brian Brom and Brom was the 3. By next year, year 2, they spent a 2nd round pick, an early 2nd on Brian Brom. In year 2, at the end of camp, they released him. Like, imagine releasing a 2nd round developmental quarterback in year 2. Like, that's how rough it was for Brian Brom, number one. And number two, how comfortable they felt with Matt Flynn being the backup. Now, I don't think they have that same level of comfort with Michael Pratt, but it reminds me a little bit of that situation where I think Pratt just has been the better quarterback from the beginning of camp up until now. I think he has more upside. And I think even though Clifford has the year extra of experience and was the earlier draft pick, I think Pratt's the one that potentially has beaten him out. And I think Pratt's the one that you probably don't want to subject to waivers. I do think they could get Clifford through. McCrary did show out well today. I was very impressed. All right. Any last questions here? If Clifford does get picked up, we could just pick up another team's QB3. I think that's probably mostly true. All right, friends. Any last ones? What does Omar say? Love Pratt, Jacobs, Lloyd, Wilson, blah, 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 blah. Oh, that's all right. We're just going through 53. All right. I was there. It was fun. Fireworks at the daytime. But overall, I didn't like Sean Clifford as the number 2 QB. Too many overthrows and holds onto the ball too long. Yeah, it's a tough day for Clifford. Tough camp for Clifford, to be honest. But, if he does stay on the roster, hopefully he bounces back. But I do think Pratt's been the better QB. Peter agrees. Peter, much better upside. Krista, it is very much Malik Heath at this point. I think Malik Heath is wide receiver 6. Can you explain how the IR works with cut downs and everything? So it's the same as it always was, save for the fact that you have 2 injured reserve players that you can now put on IR and bring back without having to subject them to season-ending IR. So in the past, before on cut down day, if you put somebody on injured reserve prior to cut downs, or during cut downs, I should say, you would lose those players for the season. You could not bring them back. Now, the NFL will allow you to designate 2 players that are injured reserve but could return during the season earlier, or during cut down time, so that you can designate them ahead, still bring them back, and not have to take them up or take a 53-man roster spot up with them on that final cut down day. So for example, Luke Tenuta last year made the initial 53-man roster. And then a day later, they put him on IR, and that was probably the spot that they used to claim Ben Sims or somebody else. But Ben Sims is a clear, obvious one that they claim, so we'll just say him. But there was never any chance that he was going to make the initial 53, but they had to put him on the initial 53 in order to be able to bring him back at any point in the season. Now, it just ended up that he never got back to the point of being able to come back from the injury and play, but they put him on the 53 just in case they wanted to at some point. Now, in that same situation, if Tenuta was in the same situation this year, they could just put Tenuta on the 53. They could add somebody else, they could put him on IR and then add somebody else to the 53 so they don't have to waive somebody and put them through waivers. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility with 2 of those spots. All right, Cameron T, how did Katana look today? I didn't see a ton out of Catan. He was behind Zane Anderson. He and Benny Sapp, I think, played a lot towards the end of the game. That's going to be one that I'm going to have to probably look a little bit more at the all 22 to see if there was anything super noteworthy on, but nothing good or bad stood out in real time. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, but we'll hope to try to get a little bit more detail on that when I go through the tape today. All right, friends, you guys are the absolute best. Over 600 people in here. I think we were closing in at 700 at one point, but appreciate you guys a ton. Hope you enjoyed the game today. Hope you enjoyed the post-game chat even more. I will be back here with a full recap of everything that happened in the game and kind of breaking it down a little bit greater detail for tomorrow's episode. That'll be up later today for members. We'll do probably a 53-man prediction for Monday. So keep an eye out for that. Grades will be up for preseason, hopefully sooner rather than later. So a lot of really cool stuff coming up. And then before you know it, we'll be preparing for Packers Eagles. So a lot of fun stuff that we'll be going over, and it's going to be here before you know it. I will see you all soon. Thank you for everyone for showing up today. Always appreciate it. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.